All right, it's 9 o'clock. We'll begin the Delaware County Redevelopment Commission meeting. It is February 8th. Will everybody stand for the pledge? I
pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Brad, you want to call roll?
John Adams. Here. Michelle Batters.
Here.
Bryce Conyers.
Here.
Amber Green.
Here.
Bob Keesley.
Here.
Angie Moore.
Here.
All right, move on to approval of the minutes from January 11th meeting.
Move to approve.
Second. Got a first and second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Number 4, Innovation Connector Annual Request for Assistance. I know Ted's not here.
Yeah, so Ted, it's, as all you know from the email exchange that I forwarded, Ted wanted to be here really bad to present, but he's at a conference in St. Petersburg. I think he's a speaker on how to run Innovation Connectors, so he's doing good work. Basically, the letter I forwarded you, I told Ted that I would just highlight some points in here for him and then let you make the decision. In 2023, the Innovation Connector served more clients than ever in every part of Delaware County. Ted has worked to establish the Innovation Connector as the major entrepreneurial hub of East Central Indiana. He calls it the place to grow and start a business in a community. During 2023, he met with and consulted over 250 businesses and people with, wanting to start ventures. Most were facing significant challenges that he helped with in some way. Many of those are not one and done meetings. He's constantly refreshing meetings, meeting with them on an ongoing basis. He spent considerable time reviewing his budget for 2024-2025. I know he's making requests from the city for continued assistance of the Innovation Connector. The funds that he has budgeted now are not sufficient to pay for his programming, events, personnel, portion of the overhead expenses. He provides this room to this body for no charge, as well as the facility with utilities and taking out the trash, everything. 2024 is considered to be a huge cash flow challenge for him. He's making a request of $50,000 from Delaware County in 2024. He's willing to split that $50,000 into multiple payments if the commission desires to do that. He assures that there will be a good return on investment of the funds, assisting small businesses throughout our community in 2024. And he also goes on to talk about his soft landings program, which I won't get into that detail. So I can try to answer questions on behalf of Ted, and I'm happy to entertain this in whatever way you want to do. There is sufficient funds. How this has been supported in the past, Ted has made previous requests of this body in the past on an annual basis. This is just his latest update request of the body this year. Board has funded amounts, I think, ranging from $10,000 to $25,000. This is double what he has requested in the past. I can tell you from my experience here, I think some of you know this, that as the county works to attract international companies to come here, he provides office space, he provides counseling, he does bank introductions. Trevi Robotics has an office here. FT Castings has a mailbox here. Gamma Mechanica has a presence here. Inox Market Service had their initial presence here, so he's been very instrumental in that. So that'll continue to support all his work in that way.
Does anybody have any questions?
Brad, you mentioned, sorry.
No, go ahead.
So you said I can't recall, we have this request last year, is this for 24? Because the letter says 24 and 25, but then it says 24, so I'm unclear, is this year, next year?
I believe this is this year. He references that he's looked at his budgets for 24 and 25, but then in the 4th paragraph down, first sentence, he says he's asking for $50,000 in 2024. So this year specifically.
But it implies an additional request becoming in 2025.
I would anticipate that. Yeah, he has done this on an annual basis.
And if the board approves this request, would it be equally split amongst the
Very good
TV?
point. Yes, thank you
TV.
for
District,
clearing
sorry.
that up. This would likely be divided amongst, this is what has been done in the past by previous boards, is requested to divide the request into equal amounts of the 10 strongest county TIF districts. So it spreads the cost around the county.
No other questions? I'll entertain a motion.
So moved.
First, second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Abstain.
Abstain.
We'll move on to the HTCU expansion. Chuck,
Where do you want me?
wherever you're comfortable.
My name is Chuck Zimmers. I'm the director for the Delaware County High-Tech Crimes Unit. I apologize to whoever didn't get a packet. I prepared 5. There's a brief history, how we were created. State of Indiana saw the need for assistance with processing digital evidence. We had the state lab. Historically, they've been backed up 9 months to a year, and some of the stuff can't wait that long. So the legislature set aside $3 million, created 10 high-tech crimes units around the state, and divided the funds evenly between them. Delaware County was lucky enough to get one of those. We're growing steadily. They divided it by population, the region you cover. There's a map there that shows who covers what. We cover 11 counties based on the population. We've got some real little counties. But it's steadily grown. We started in 2022. It took about 5 months to spin up, get the equipment and training. So we started processing evidence in May of that year. We received 131 devices in 22. That jumped to 440 devices the following year. So it's growing exponentially. In January, we received 50 devices. If you do the math, we're looking at over 600 devices by the end of the year, and we'd be fairly overwhelmed with that. We've got space in the prosecutor's office currently. We are based out of the prosecutor's office, so we are a branch of the prosecutor's office. That's who I answer to, and the state level, I answer to the people there too. But we're in the lab area, is a little over 200 square feet. I've got 3 people now working in there. I've got a separate office, but it's not much bigger than that. We're looking to expand, move to the county building. The 3rd floor, the commissioners have given a portion of that. We have a 3-phase plan. Phase 1 is what I'm here about today. We would move everything we now have to that phase 1. It'll go from a little over 300 square feet total to around 1,300 square feet. We have an internship program. We've been talking to Ball State and AU through the Cyber-Tooth program that Ball Brothers Foundation runs. We just have no room to expand, no room to add more equipment. I've got shelves on walls with computers on them, and there's just not much we can do in the space we have anymore. I've attached 2 quotes. First one is for materials, $36,891.19, and then there also is the labor quote for $52,764.92. The biggest need would be the materials. If you were able to fund that, if you'd like to fund the whole thing, that would be amazing too. We have an RFP from the Ball Brothers Foundation. They've supported us so far. They've given us $50,000 the first 2 years, each year, and now they've asked us in their RFP to ask for $100,000. We do use, the 50 has generally been used for tools. All of our advanced tools are year-to-year licensing. And it looks like this year we're going to spend a little over $100,000 on tool licensing. and that will be there again next year. And the industry goes up about 10% a year on all those costs. Hopefully the state will increase our funding over time. State budget runs every 2 years. And IPAC, who administers our funds, has said they will seek increased funding. But we know how that can go. So seeking any help you guys can provide, providing a service to the community. We're turning stuff around. I looked yesterday, and the average since we've started, the average turnaround is, I believe, 56 days, which is a far cry from 9 months to a year. So we're moving things through and hopefully getting justice for members of our community and East Central Indiana. Anybody have any questions?
Is this the only bid you guys obtained? Just from Steve?
Yes. He's been very economical. If you'd like to see another bid, I can.
Do you know, I guess this was back in November, I know material costs and stuff rise.
Correct. Yeah, he put that in there that this may change.
I guess that would be my question, how much, if it's went up, how much? I mean, that's 3 months ago.
Right.
Anybody else have any questions?
I know first of all, thank you for what you do. That I think is very important. Are we receiving financial support for this from the outlying counties? Is this more of a regional approach?
I would love to pursue funding from them. Since the funding comes from the state, I'm guessing a lot of them would say, we're already helping you. Some of the other funding sources, I'll tell you, we have received over $100,000 in training and materials from the National Computer Forensic Institute run by the Secret Service. We go do training down there. It's all free. They give us equipment. So we've probably come back with over $50,000, $60,000 equipment and tool licenses. So that helps offset some of our expenses. But no, we've not gone to the other counties yet, and I'm not quite sure how to approach that. If I ask, and I dealt with Delaware County, great, but I can't imagine going to 10 other counties and going through all the necessary hoops. I was thinking to ask them each for $5,000, but I can't imagine the meeting requirements for me being out of the lab that much. It takes 2 meetings to move funding here. So that would be 20 meetings, and then anything else I'm responsible for with them. But, and in the lab, we all process. I've got 3 analysts, but I handle some of that load too. So it's trying to find a happy medium. I would love for someone else to maybe go to the other counties.
Would you like to see an updated quote, maybe a second one, or for the next meeting?
I think so. I mean, what's your time frame on that process? I mean, I know yesterday probably, but.
The contractor has told me he could have it built out if he has all his materials and funded in, he said 3 to 4 weeks. I would love to be there as soon as possible. I know if I have to wait for Ball Brothers, that grant process is not completed until I believe the middle of May. So if you guys partially fund and I'm waiting for the remainder, build out won't start until I have all the funds. I don't want to get in a bad position with anybody.
For purposes of the minutes, can you restate the labor quote that you have, please?
Labor is $52,764.92.
Thank you.
And these were just estimates, so we wouldn't even call it a quote, he called it an estimate. So he did state in there that the longer everything is flexible, everything costs different amounts. So.
I think Bryce raised me, the quotes are now 3 months old and there's only one. So I personally like to see a second quote and current quotes just due to the fluctuations. I mean, if this comes back at $40,000 next month by the time we approve it, or if it's $40,000 today, we've helped the high-tech crimes unit, but it won't be able to operate.
I agree.
Would you be able to not pass something up to a certain amount, not to exceed? So if it came in less, you would pay less? Does that,
John, do you have?
does that,
It depends on, I mean, the board can table it, the board can make that motion, decide whether, X amount not to exceed that.
Yeah.
It's up to the board to make that motion. Either option is available.
I think I'd like to see at least a second quote.
So we'll make a motion to table this until next week.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll make that motion.
I want to clarify my motion, just so I know, Randy, we're
To
asking,
get an
we're asking them
updated
to come
quote
back
and
though
a
next
second
month.
quote.
I'll happily second that.
I got a first and second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, Matt, you're up. Baker Tilly Annual TIF presentation.
Good morning, everyone. Nice to see you this year. For those who don't know me, I know there's some new faces. I'm Matt Ecker. I'm a partner with Baker Tilly out of Indianapolis. We're the financial advisor for the Redevelopment Commission and have been for many, many years now. Joining me today is my associate, Julia Dinkman. She actually did most of the real work on this report. So when you're looking at I think it's 170 pages this iteration, Julia was living it for the last few months. But as always, what we've done is we've distilled the report into a summary PowerPoint. And what we're going to do, I know that there have been some file size issues. We'll make sure that we get an electronic version of the report and the PowerPoint to Brad that he can get to you that's not, 100 megabytes and eating up all the space on your email. To set the table a little bit for this report, we do this annually as a snapshot of the health of all of your allocation areas as of now based on current information. This is based on 2024 certified tax rates and assessed values. The one thing that we don't have and what won't be available until April would be the circuit breaker credits for the allocation areas, which are done by the state, and it just takes them until then to get that done. But we've got best estimates based on 2023 data. We're projecting out for each of these areas. We're estimating tax increment. We're including summary information on the obligations for those areas, the term of those areas, and allowing you to see, here's how much we're bringing in, here's how much we're spending on debt obligations, and then that gives you an idea of what you have available to fund other pay-as-you-go projects like the presentations that preceded us. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna dive into this. I'm gonna keep it high level. Happy to answer any detailed questions as they come up from this group, but I know that time is precious and we could probably spend all morning covering this. But again, please interrupt me if you have a specific question. And then also my contact information is included here. You can also always follow up by email or phone. So we're just gonna start with the Morrison Road allocation area. This area is one of your two, what we call legacy TIF areas. It was originally established before July 1st of 1995. So the rules on the term of that area are a little bit different. Dale Hill is your other legacy area. The term of this area is tied to the final maturity of the obligations that were outstanding as of July 1, 2015. And that was the 2015 bonds that were issued, but then subsequently refinanced in 2021 along with a new money issuance. So you'll see that a portion of this is annexed into Muncie, but you have two outstanding bonds, the refunding bonds that have an outstanding balance of about $3.2 million and the just tax increment revenue bonds that have an outstanding balance of about $5.2 million. And both of those mature in 2040. This area will expire following their final maturity. Moving on to the next page, you'll see the 2023 tax increment you collected right on top of what we had estimated, about $1.2 million. So we don't have any real concerns with this allocation area. In 2024, due to the growth and expiration of abatements, we're estimating about $1.4 million in tax increment revenues this year against about $650,000 in debt service payments. So that leaves about $830,000 for pay-as-you-go projects. One thing I do want to point out, annually, the Redevelopment Commission has elected to pass through the incremental assessed value that it could capture from homestead residential parcels. This being an older TIF area, you have the ability to capture that. But as a policy decision annually, really ever since I've worked with Delaware County, the Redevelopment Commission has elected to pass through that assessed value so that the overlapping taxing units see the immediate benefit of that incremental assessed value. In 2023, that amounted to about $29.7 million of assessed value that you were able to add to the tax base of the overlapping units. That's about $700,000 of TIF revenues you could have generated, but instead that's being spread amongst the overlapping taxing units. Not as new money, that's essentially $700,000 that's being absorbed by all the taxpayers in this TIF area in addition to every other taxpayer in those taxing districts. Moving on, one thing we have included for each of these areas, Brad provided ongoing updates of just pay-as-you-go projects. Part of this annual meeting process is to lay out what you're going to be spending the money on. So here's some general projects. Again, this is something, as reality happens, you can be nimble and adapt. You just have to make sure that the project types are in your economic development plan, and Mr. Brook can help you with any amendments to that if needed. Moving on to the next page, we have included an impact on the overlapping taxing units of that pass-through. You can see that essentially, if you weren't passing through that assessed value, all those overlapping taxing districts would have had a slightly higher tax rate depending on how much of that $29 million resides in each taxing district. And their levies would, in certain respects, be a little bit lower for those non-maximum levy funds. So that's quantifying the very real benefit that the overlapping taxing units and taxpayers are seeing from that ongoing pass-through action through the Development Commission. The next slide simply is a graphic illustration. Not everyone likes to look at a sea of numbers on spreadsheets. So we graphically illustrated the estimated tax increment revenues against the annual debt service obligations of your refunding bonds and the new money bonds. Moving on next, we have Morrison Road allocation area number 2. It was established in 2018. There are no outstanding obligations. There has not been any growth as of yet, so there's no revenue. But it's in place so that as things start happening, you don't have to worry about going through the legal procedures to set up a new allocation area. Next, moving on to NEBO number 1, or what a lot of people colloquially call it, the NEBO Land Partners allocation area. It was established in 2002, so it expires in 2032. It was divided and then subsequently expanded in 2012 and then 2018. You have those NEBO Land Partners bonds that are outstanding. They were issued in 2012. There's about $1.5 million outstanding on those. They're payable solely from a pledge of TIF from this allocation area, and if that TIF falls short, the NEBO Land Partners Group is required to make up the difference. There is no obligation of the county to put any other funds into this TIF area to support those bonds if the TIF revenues fall short. And as you'll see on the next slide, that's unfortunately been what has happened subsequently or over the years. In 2023, generated about $185,000 in revenues. 2024, we're estimating $192,000. That's against $208,000 in debt service payments that are due this year. So that $15,000 shortfall is going to be made up from the developer. And they understood that when they entered into the transaction back in 2012. And again, here's the graph that shows it in a picture. Moving on to NEBO number 2, there are no bonds outstanding for this allocation area. In 2023, you collected a little below what was estimated. That's something that we're monitoring to determine if that was due to delinquencies or something worse. But about $30,000 short. We're estimating it's going to grow to about $225,000 in 2024. This is one, because you have no obligations, you simply have it available to spend on pay-as-you-go projects, or you can monetize it if you'd like. And the next page, you have some of the proposed projects that are being contemplated for that allocation area. NEVO number 3, established in 2018. There hasn't been any growth in that area as of yet, but it's in place in case something pops. Right now, you're not generating any revenues. Park Save-A-Lot and Park 1 allocation areas out by I-69. Those were established in 2000, and there have been a lot of amendments to it subsequently. And if you look in the detailed report, you'll see the laundry list of amendments. For those 2 allocation areas, the county, the Redevelopment Commission did issue bonds last year payable from the TIF revenues generated in these allocation areas, the 2023 bonds. We'll get into a little more detail on those when we get to the Bervini section. But just wanted to highlight that those are obligated revenues. In 2023, your actual distribution was actually a little above what was estimated, and sometimes the math just works out that way. And then in 2024, we're estimating additional growth to about $419,000 of revenues. Here are proposed projects. A lot of these projects are actually being tackled with those 2023 bonds, but there's also going to be some free cash flow available for pay-as-you-go projects. Park Tucson and New Tucson are out in that Park 1 larger economic development area as well. Those have a term that's tied to the issuance of the 2010 bonds that were subsequently refinanced by a 2014 bond issuance. Those bonds, the 2014 bonds, are the MER6 bonds. They have about $2.6 million outstanding, payable solely from pledges of TIF from the Park Tucson and New Tucson allocation areas. And if those revenues fall short, it's an obligation of the Murrays. So again, and you'll see on the next couple pages, the TIF revenues have not been sufficient to fully service those bonds. So the shortfalls have been absorbed by the Murrays. No other county funds are exposed to that obligation. And you'll see on the next couple of pages, in 2023, you collected about $316,000, estimating that it ticks up slightly in 2024, but you're still going to be about $23,000 short. So that's going to be an obligation of the Murrays, and that's something that your bond trustee, registrar, and paying agent annually helps coordinate with them. Again, they were eyes wide open when they entered into this transaction, so that's just how it's worked out. And then we've got the graphic illustration on the next slide. Next, we have the Park Bervini and New Bervini allocation areas, again, located out in that larger Park 1 industrial park. They were split off of that larger area back in the 2010s. The New Bervini allocation area was amended last year. This group took action to add 1 parcel and also to designate Muncie Power Products and SRM Concrete as designated taxpayers. You may recall, and the same that applies in the Tucson area and for Park Save-A-Lot. You can't just capture personal property investment. You have to take action to designate them as a designated taxpayer. So you've got companies in some of these areas that you're not capturing the personal property increment, so that's an immediate benefit. But here, the policy decision was made to designate them to capture that to help service the debt that was issued, the 2023 bonds, and also fund other priority projects out in those allocation areas. You issued those bonds, about $2.4 million worth in December 2023. They are payable from pledges from the Bervini TIF areas, the Park 1, Park Save-A-Lot TIF areas, and the I-69 allocation area as well. They're no longer carrying a property tax backup. You'll recall the rail spur bonds that had been outstanding and then refinanced. Those had a property tax backup where if the TIF fell short, it would be the obligation of the county to levy a property tax to cover those shortfalls. As a part of taking out and redeeming those bonds last year, you relieved yourselves of that obligation, and the new bond issue does not carry that property tax backup. So we call that a pure TIF bond. So that got done last year. They were privately placed with First Merchants in December. And those mature in 2038, and you could begin to optionally redeem them in 2020. Sought to be a little more aggressive on that optional redemption just in case cash comes in and you wanted to pay them off early. For the Park Bervini and New Bervini allocation areas, actual 2023 tax increment of $147,000, estimating that ticks up slightly In 2024, the 2023 bonds debt service due is $338,000. You've got $419,000 coming in from the other pledged areas. So you're going to have enough to meet those debt service obligations and still have funds available for additional development out there. One thing I do want to emphasize in these estimates, we are including Muncie Power Products because they have provided us with investment information. But we don't have the SRM baked into this. So to the extent that there is additional growth out there beyond our conservative estimates, that's going to be on top of what's needed to service these bonds and hopefully give you more resources for other projects. Moving on to the I-69, again, out in that general area. Payable 2023, you collected about $7,300, estimated to grow a little bit to $9,300 in 2024. Beyond the bond obligation, you do have some proposed projects out in that area. Moving on. The Magna allocation area, which was established in 2004, has a 30-year term. You no longer have any bonds outstanding. You no longer have the shell building obligation because that building did sell. You collected about $1,076,000 in 2023, estimated to tick up slightly to about $1.15 million this year. And we all know how much is going on out in that industrial center area. There's plenty of projects out there that are on your list. And these projects, because with Midwest Metal, with the North Industria, you don't have any outstanding bonds. That, if you have big projects that come in now where you need more cash, you need to monetize this revenue stream because you don't have any obligations out there, say for PRL, which is on its own, you could leverage these in a bond issue if, as a policy decision, you determined that was the right course of action to take. If you needed, $5 million today that you didn't have, that would be what you could do. The industrial center allocation area, no outstanding bonds. Brought in about $419,000 last year, ticking down slightly because of some assessed value fluctuations in 2024, down to about $407,000. Again, plenty of projects out there. These funds aren't obligated to any bond issues as of now. Midwest Metal. Midwest Metal is again out in that same industrial center geography. It was split from that original industrial center allocation area. It did have bonds outstanding that were issued in 2012, but some of you on this board might recall that those were paid off early a few years ago. Last year, you brought in about $390,000, estimated to grow to about $405,000 this year, and a litany of projects that you guys have going on out there. PRL, again, out in that same geography, established in 2010. You do have bonds outstanding. About $1.2 million outstanding as of today. Those are payable solely from PRL TIF and then also the ABB CREED that is generated out in that area. Those mature in 2030. You may recall that we've looked in the past at paying those off early, but there's some fairly onerous redemption provisions attached to those that don't really create a benefit of paying them off early. So those are still outstanding. Tax incremental loan, you're generating about $614,000 last year, $617,000 this year. That's more than enough to service the $260,000 of principal and interest due this year, which leaves the $1 million that we would estimate you collect from the PR or from the ABB CREED available for projects. And we all know that CREED revenues have a little bit of a different process for expending them, but I know Brad stays on top of that along with John. So you do have additional cash flow that's available to fund other projects out in that area. North Industrial Center, this is a new area that you established at the same time, I guess newer area. It seems like 2021 was just like a couple weeks ago, but that was now 3 years ago. So you established this one at the same time as the Houston Shell Building allocation area and the Fountain Square allocation area. You are starting to generate some growth out there. You collected about $92,000 last year, estimated to collect about $91,000 this year. No bond obligations. You've got plenty of pay-as-you-go projects, or again, you can obligate these revenues to a bond issue if you determine that's the right course of action. One of your two new allocation areas that's an offshoot of the Industrious Center along the State Road 67 corridor. It was established last July. No bonds outstanding yet. Actually, you're not going to be able to capture any increment until 2025 because 23 pay 24 is your base year. So we'll be looking this year, working with the auditor's office on neutralizations. We'll see if there's been any growth. And as you start to see growth in that area, you're going to generate some revenues, and you've got plenty of projects on the docket for that area. The Fuson Shell Building allocation area, we all know about the Fuson Shell Building. This was established as its own allocation area back in 2021 as a part of the Living Greens Farms project. We're aware that that project's on hold currently, but it is in place. Those bonds were issued in an authorized amount of $4 million. So you can draw up to $4 million, but they were issued as draw bonds. So that full $4 million obligation was not created on day one. At closing, they only drew $135,000, and that was to pay the transaction costs. They have not paid or submitted any subsequent requests for draws. So that's hanging out there, and that's something that Living Greens, once that project gets started, that they can start drawing on that again, and you don't have to go back through the process of reissuing bonds or anything. So it makes it a little more streamlined of operation once something starts happening out there. Those bonds are payable solely from a pledge of 70% of the tax increment revenues generated from that allocation area. So that's a limited obligation, and so again, that means 30% of those revenues will be available to the Redevelopment Commission to use as you see fit. Last year, you only collected about half of what was estimated, and again, we're looking into whether that was a delinquency issue or something else. Sometimes if the tax payments come in a couple days late, then they're not going to get distributed until May. So that's something we're looking into further. 2024 estimated to be about $185,000. Living Greens is a designated taxpayer, so when personal property investment starts happening out there from Living Greens, you would start generating revenue off of that to support those bond payments. If for whatever reason something happened and another company moved in, you would have to designate that new company or an additional company as a designated taxpayer if you wanted to capture. And that's just, sometimes these companies bring in offshoots or something like that to operate in the same building. So just wanted you to be aware of that. The estimated TIP revenues here, still based on Living Greens investment information that we had. We just kicked everything back a year, giving the benefit of delays, and hopefully something starts happening this year. Fountain Square. This is not the area south of downtown Indianapolis. This is the area south of Muncie. So this is the allocation area that was established for the CANPAC project back in 2021. I think we're all familiar with that project. We collected about $46,000 of tax increment last year. There's been continued growth out there as that building goes vertical. We're estimating tax increment of about $184,000 in 2024. You did in 2021 authorize and issue 2 series of bonds to incentivize the CANPAC project, Series 2021A, which was issued based on what they called the base project, and then the Series 2021B, which is issued based on the additional phase, is what they called it, that as it continues to build out, they're continuing to invest. As of this year, $19.1 million has been drawn on the Series 2021A bonds out of the maximum draw amount of $19.4 million. Those are payable solely from 75% of the tax increment collected from that base project in the allocation area for the first 15 years that it's paying TIF. And those mature in 2040. And we had to account for the gap between issuance and that project actually coming online. And then the Series 2021B bonds for the additional phase, there's only been $39,000 drawn to date. Maximum authorized amount of $6.6 million. That will get triggered when they finish out that building. And it's our understanding that it's on its way. Again, both of these are payable solely from 75% of the increment allocable to the the base project and the additional phase. The remaining 25% becomes available for the redevelopment commission to use as it sees fit. And on the next page, you'll see a graphic with the estimated revenues. And again, CANPAC was fully on board with this when these were issued. It'd be a little short in the early years, but then we estimate that there's going to be surplus available down the line. There's going to be the ability to prepay those if you deem that fit and if CANPAC wants them to be prepaid. Moving on to Daleville, your other legacy area that was established in January of '94, subsequently amended. You do have two obligations that are outstanding, two debt obligations. You have the 2015 TIF bonds, about $2.9 million outstanding payable solely from Daleville TIF. Those have similar call provisions from Star Financial that make it not really economically viable to prepay them. You also have the Daleville Town Hall BOT financing with First Harrison Bank, a little over $4 million outstanding on that obligation, again payable solely from a pledge of Daleville TIF. And through 2032, you also pledged $112,933 of TIF revenues to the Delaware County Regional Wastewater District. That supplements rate impacts to the ratepayers in that wastewater district. In 2023, the estimated distribution was about $957,000. Came in about $100,000 short, so that's another one we're looking into because of the size. I've sorted through a lot of parcel data, so we're looking into that. Estimated 24, about $940,000. You've obligated $627,000 of that for this year for your debt and the sewer obligation. So that leaves about $312,000 for other projects. And I know Brad has been, on this one, we've been working closely to help cash flow because there's a lot of projects in the hopper for this area, as we understand. Next pages, we have those proposed projects, and then also the graphic illustrating your different obligations against the annual revenue stream. Daleville 2, which was established in 2020, no bonds outstanding, collecting about $30,000, estimated to grow to about $34,000. The Forza allocation area, which was also established in 2020, that's still sitting empty. So no revenues, no obligations, but it's kind of dry powder in case something happens out there. BioVision Ag Park. This one was established in 2006. Not a whole lot of activity out there, and the Redevelopment Commission for the last several years now has elected to pass through the incremental assessed value that it could capture in that allocation area, so it would be to the benefit of the overlapping taxing units. You haven't terminated that area, which means that if something does happen out there, you have the ability to stop passing through the assessed value, start capturing again, and giving you a new revenue stream to support that project or other initiatives out in that area. Bell Perch, this was established in 2009. You no longer have outstanding obligations. The 2013 bonds were paid off last June. So the money coming in from this allocation area is now available to fund priority projects of the Redevelopment Commission. You collected about $43,000 last year, estimated to be about $52,000 this year. The 69 and 28 Gaston, this one was established in 2017, fairly sizable tract of land out by Gaston, but there hasn't been any incremental assessed value generated as of yet. There are no obligations, but there's lots of projects out there so that, again, once this area starts developing, you're well positioned to start funding projects as the revenues come in. Then your other newly created allocation area for 2023, the East State Road 32 corridor, that was established last July. Your first opportunity to capture revenues will be next year, so that's one that we'll keep an eye on as we go through the assessed value certification process with the auditor's office later this summer. So that's a heck of a lot of information in a compressed period of time. Bryce, I was not tracking the timeline and it challenged me. But happy to answer any questions in the moment, or as I mentioned, either through Brad or reaching out directly to me. I'm happy always to discuss any detail that this body desires or that any of you guys want to know. we're constantly in communication with Brad, monitoring these things and keeping things going. So pleasure to be here today. Appreciate the opportunity to continue working with all of you.
Thanks, Matt. Any questions for Matt or anything?
It's one of those that comes up every year. I end up saying it to Brad, or Matt says the same thing, but Amber knew and Michelle knew. And Daleville itself is almost entirely in a TIF. And
Yes.
without cooperation from the Redevelopment Commission, while there's some great growth in Daleville, they're very limited. And so we see things that come through this body to improve
Yes.
Daleville because they have no tools otherwise.
Yes.
Hence the bot agreement and some annual support.
Yes, that's correct. They're not getting the benefit of the assessed value growth that you're capturing, which doesn't necessarily mean that, that amount of money that's captured in Daleville would be that amount of new money to those units, but it's a creative way to utilize the TIF to support Daleville and still have that available to fund other county priorities out in that region as well. I actually cite that as a good example of a county collaborating with one of its municipalities frequently.
All right, any other questions? Move on to invoices. Anybody have any questions on the invoices? I'll entertain a motion.
So moved.
Second.
And a first and second, all in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Bonds, any questions on the bonds?
Matt answered my questions in this presentation.
Move to
Good
approve.
deal. Got a first?
Second.
Got a first and second, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Public comment, do I have any comments? I see no comments, I will move for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Got a first and second, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Meeting adjourned.